The theater lights glowed softly against rows of velvet seats as people slowly filled the hall, their conversations blending into a gentle hum. It was one of those ordinary evenings when the audience expected a pleasant concert, nothing more. The orchestra was good, the venue elegant, and the night promised familiar classical melodies that would drift through the hall like a calm breeze. No one expected anything life-changing. On the stage, musicians adjusted their instruments and flipped through sheets of music. The conductor stood quietly near the podium, glancing at the audience as the seats continued to fill. Programs rustled. Phones were silenced. Somewhere in the back row, someone laughed softly. Then the lights dimmed. The quiet spread across the room like a ripple on water. The conductor stepped forward and gave a welcoming nod to the audience. Applause rose warmly, echoing off the curved ceiling. When it faded, the orchestra began its opening piece, a gentle classical composition that flowed gracefully through the hall. Violins sang in harmony, cellos hummed beneath them, and the audience settled into the rhythm of the evening. Everything was exactly as expected. Until it wasn't. Halfway through the program, after the orchestra finished a particularly energetic piece, the conductor turned toward the audience again. "This evening," he said, his voice calm but curious, "we have a very special surprise." The audience leaned forward slightly. Surprises weren't unusual in concerts, but the conductor's tone suggested something different. He continued, "Tonight, a young musician will be joining us on stage." A quiet murmur moved through the crowd. A child performer. From the side of the stage, a small figure appeared. She couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. The girl stepped forward carefully, holding a violin that seemed almost too big for her small frame. Her dark hair was tied neatly behind her head, and she wore a simple white dress that shimmered softly under the lights. The audience watched with curiosity. Some people smiled politely, others whispered to each other. Children sometimes performed at concerts as special guests, but expectations were usually modest. The orchestra was filled with professionals who had trained for decades. A little girl with a violin seemed more like a charming interlude than the highlight of the evening. She reached the center of the stage and bowed politely. The audience applauded kindly. The conductor leaned down and spoke to her softly. She nodded. Then she lifted her violin. The room became very still. For a moment, nothing happened. The bow hovered above the strings. The little violinist closed her eyes. And then she began to play. The first note floated into the air so gently that some people almost missed it. It was soft, clear, and impossibly pure. The sound didn't feel like it came from a small instrument in a child's hands. It felt like it came from somewhere deeper. Another note followed, then another. Within seconds, the audience realized something unusual was happening. The tone was rich, confident, beautifully controlled. The little girl's bow moved with calm precision, her fingers dancing across the strings with surprising grace. Every note seemed to carry emotion far beyond her years. Whispers disappeared. People stopped shifting in their seats. The hall grew completely silent. The orchestra joined quietly behind her, following the conductor's gentle signals. Their instruments formed a soft foundation beneath the violin's melody. But it was the child's playing that commanded the room. The music began to swell. What started as a delicate melody slowly grew into something powerful. The violin sang through the air, weaving a story that no one had expected to hear that night. The girl's expression changed as she played. Her eyes remained closed, her face calm, as though the music was guiding her rather than the other way around. The audience felt it, that strange moment when music stops being sound and becomes emotion. In the third row, an elderly man leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Near the back, a woman quietly wiped tears from her cheek. The performance wasn't perfect in the technical sense that critics often describe. But it was something far more rare. It was honest. Every note carried feeling. The violin's voice rose higher, filling the theater with warmth and longing. When the orchestra swelled behind her, the little violinist didn't shrink back. She rose with them. Her bow moved faster now, stronger, her fingers gliding confidently along the strings. Gasps echoed softly through the crowd. How could someone so small create something so powerful? Minutes passed, but the audience hardly noticed time moving. They were too busy listening. The melody shifted again, turning softer, almost fragile. The girl leaned slightly into the instrument, drawing out long, delicate notes that hung in the air like fading sunlight. The orchestra fell quieter. Now the violin stood alone. Every sound in the hall disappeared except for the music. No coughing, no rustling, not even breathing seemed loud enough to disturb the moment. Then the melody climbed again, higher, brighter, fuller than before. The child's bow danced across the strings with growing confidence. Her body swayed gently with the rhythm, as though she was floating inside the music itself. The conductor watched her with amazement. He had rehearsed with hundreds of musicians. But this felt different. The final movement approached. The orchestra rose behind her once more, their instruments building a powerful wave of sound. The little violinist answered with a melody that soared above them all, clear and fearless. It felt like hope, like joy, like something that had been waiting to be heard. The final notes arrived suddenly but beautifully. The girl drew her bow across the strings one last time, letting the sound fade slowly into silence. Then she lowered the violin. For a moment, the entire theater remained frozen. No one moved. It was as if the audience needed a second to remember where they were. Then someone in the front row stood. A single clap echoed through the hall. Another followed. Then another. Within seconds, the entire theater erupted into applause. People rose from their seats, cheering, clapping, and shouting in amazement. The sound of the standing ovation thundered through the hall. The little violinist looked surprised. She glanced toward the conductor, unsure what to do. He smiled warmly and gestured toward the audience. She bowed again, her small frame bending politely. The applause only grew louder. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Others shook their heads in disbelief. No one had expected that moment when the evening began. The conductor leaned down and whispered something to the girl again. She nodded shyly. Then she lifted her violin once more. The audience quieted instantly. What followed was something even more magical. The orchestra began a gentle accompaniment while the little violinist played a soft encore melody, simpler, sweeter, almost like a lullaby. This time the music felt intimate, personal, as though she was sharing a secret with every person in the room. By the time the final note faded, the audience was completely captivated. The applause returned again, louder than before. People knew they had witnessed something rare. Not just talent, something deeper, something unforgettable. Long after the concert ended and the audience slowly left the theater, the story of that moment began to spread. People talked about it in quiet conversations as they walked home. They posted about it online. They told friends and family about the tiny violinist who had changed the entire night with a single performance. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments arrive when no one expects them. And sometimes, all it takes is a small violin, a quiet stage, and a brave young musician willing to let the music speak. That was the moment everything changed. Violin.